For one day.
So,
You're great today.
good morning, committee.
Good morning.
Good to see you, and Senator Calmer had to go to Health Ed to explain.
Kim.
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 It's
Brian.
We're in the
Just say
same
Brian.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, you could have gone.
I go.
Yeah, and so he'll be along a minute or a few minutes. He said he'd be only 10 minutes and he could explain the ed bill. It's Thursday, April 6th, and we're going to talk a little bit about universal school meals. And we have Rosie Kruger with us. So good morning, Rosie, and welcome to the committee. And
I'm actually going to suggest that let council go first if you want to talk specifically about H-165.
Yeah.
So walk you
So
through that, and then I can answer your question.
that's Beth is from the council.
Yes.
Yeah, are you new there or
Yeah, I joined last session. So this is my second session. Yes.
second session? Well, welcome to the Ag Committee and
Thank you.
glad to have you. And so H-165. And so are you gonna run through it? For us? And-
Sure. Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel, whatever you
Yeah.
want. I can walk you through it at whatever level you'd like me
Well,
to do.
we have Irene, as you know, and Brian and Rich, as you know, so you don't have to be a super low level, but sort of a medium type,
Okay.
is where, I mean, we've been pretty well educated from our local school officials,
Okay.
but, yeah. So,
So the committees I usually appear in do not like me to share the screen. Do you want me to share my screen, or do you all have a copy of the bill in front of you? Great.
yeah, we have got you, got yours, Rich.
So you should have H-165 as
Yep.
passed by the House. You
Yep.
have both on your website, and maybe it looks like you all have it in front of you. Great.
Yep.
Section 1 is a findings section. The findings are actually the same as the bill that passed last year. Do you want me to walk through the findings? Do you want me to jump to the meat of the bill?
Unless there's specific questions from me, we could go.
Great.
Yeah.
So we're gonna jump to section 2, which technically begins at the bottom of page 2 on line 19, but really only with some headings there. So the first thing this bill does is it adds some language to the school foods programs subchapter in chapter 27 and title 16. And you all know title 16 is the education chapter, or I'm sorry, title. And so subchapter 2 is all of the school food programs language. And so the first amendment this bill makes is to section 1261A, which is the definition section for the subchapter. And the amended language actually appears on, or the additional language actually appears on page 3. So on line 11, adding a subdivision 4, a definition of approved independent school just for this subchapter. And that's really just to make sure it's clear that it's only for independent schools physically located here in Vermont. It's really the only reason we're adding that definition there.
And the previous bill or previous law did not spell that out.
Yes, so you can see up above there is a definition in subdivision 3 on line 8 there of independent school board. But this, when it comes to the independent, or it comes to the universal meals program, those universal meals supplements, which you'll see is the next defined term here, are only going to be available for schools located in Vermont. Technically, approved independent schools under current state law could be located outside of Vermont.
Just clarified.
Yes.
Yep.
So the next term, which is a really big term for this bill, is on line 14, subdivision 5, which is adding a definition of the universal meal supplement. So rather than repeating this language all throughout the bill, we're just going to be using the word universal meal supplement, which means the reimbursement amount paid by the state for the cost of a paid breakfast or lunch under the federal school breakfast and federal school lunch programs. And for illustration purposes, we'll just look at the breakfast definition. It's exactly the same for lunch on the next page, just substituting lunch for breakfast. So for breakfast, the universal meal supplement is a sum equal to the federal reimbursement rate for a free school breakfast, less the federal reimbursement rate for a paid school breakfast, using rates identified annually by the Agency of Education from payment levels established annually by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So that is what the state is going to be reimbursing per meal. And on page 4, subdivision 3B there is the same definition for lunch. We can just note that the word lunch is substituted for breakfast, but the analysis is the same. So the next amendment this bill makes on page 4, line 6, is to section 1262A, which is the award of grants section in the school food program. And everything above this added language, so it's adding a subdivision E, is where those asterisks are, is the language that's in current law for how schools are reimbursed for free and reduced price meals. Well, for reduced price meals, the state picks up the tab for students' meals. And so that language appears above that subdivision E, as well as some additional language regarding when the state may offer funds to schools related to the school food programs. So for the purposes of this bill, we're just adding a line here, the subdivision or subsection E. Universal meal supplements shall be awarded in accordance with section 4017 of this title. And then 4017 of this title, you'll actually see in a couple pages, is a brand new section that we're adding to address the reimbursement for this program. And we're adding it not to the school foods subchapter, we're actually adding it to the education funding chapter of Title 16.
That's where the money's coming.
Yes, and once we see that language, I'll talk about what that means for adding it to that specific part of Title 16. It does actually have a significant meaning. And then the next change here is on line 11, section 1264. This is the language kind of enabling the food program. So the food program section. So you'll see there's additional language here on line 18. So in addition to offering a school food program to children who qualify for free or reduced price meals under the federal meals programs. Additionally, each school board operating a public school shall cause to operate within each school in the school district the same school breakfast and school lunch program made available to students who qualify for those meals under the federal laws there. We're going to move on to page 5. For each attending student every school day at no charge. So public schools shall offer free meals to all students every day at no charge. And then on line 1 on page 5, to address independent schools, it reads, an approved independent school operating a school lunch and school breakfast program made available to students who qualify for those meals under the federal school food programs shall offer the same to each attending student every school day at no charge in order to qualify for the universal meal supplement. So for approved independent schools, they can, under the federal meals programs, operate the federal meals programs in the schools, but they don't have to. So if they do, and if they want to take advantage of the universal meal supplement, which we'll get into how they're reimbursed and what they are reimbursed for, then they have to offer free meals to all students every day at no charge. Yes. So for public schools, it's a shall, and for approved independent schools, it's a may. And then subdivision C here is some language to help schools, some ideas to help schools to achieve the highest level of participation in students actually taking these meals. So in operating its school breakfast and lunch program, a school district and an approved independent school shall seek to achieve the highest level of student participation which may include any or all of the following: providing breakfast meals that can be picked up by students, making breakfast available to students in classrooms after the start of the school day, for school districts collaborating with the school's Wellness Community Advisory Council in planning school meals, and a school district and an approved independent school shall count time spent by students consuming school meals during class as instructional time. So those are all, that's a may, those are not shall, those are ideas to help schools maximize student participation in the meals
But
program.
that's pretty much how it operates today, I think.
It may be, that would be a great question for Rosie, but it may be that this is something that's already happening often. So then, we're gonna go to page 6. So the next change in the school food program subchapter here is a repeal of section 1265. So in current law, there is an exemption for public schools to participate in the food meals programs. This whole section is the process they would go through if they don't want to participate in the federal school meals program. This section is actually suspended for this current school year for the meals program that was passed last year. And so this bill would repeal this section altogether, which would essentially, again, force public schools to operate a federal meals program. Then we are moving to page 7. The Universal Meal Supplement Awards. So here is that, here is the new section that I mentioned earlier. So we're adding a section in 40 to Title 16. We're adding section 4017, and this would be the Universal Meal Supplement. So this is adding a section to Chapter 133, which is the state funding of public schools chapter in Title 16. It's the last chapter there. It's where all of the ed fund language is. So we're going to refer back subsection A here. For the purpose of this section, Universal Meal Supplement has the same meaning as that term, and subdivision 1261A 5 of this title. That's the definition we walked through at the very beginning of the bill. And then we're going to address this kind of in 2 parts. We're going to talk about public schools, and then we're going to talk about approved independent schools. So for public schools, from state, I'm on line 14, page 7, from state funds appropriated to the agency from the education fund for the universal meal supplement, the agency shall provide a universal meal supplement for the cost of each meal actually provided to each student in the district during the previous quarter when meals are offered to all students at no charge pursuant to the language we just walked through in that school food program section. Reimbursement from state funds shall be available only to districts that maximize access to federal funds for the cost of the school breakfast and lunch program by participating in the community eligibility provision or provision 2, we're on page 8 of these programs.
That on line 20, that maximizes access.
Yes.
I know we talked about that earlier in the session. Who's going to determine if a school district has maximized their efforts in collecting these federal dollars? I guess Rosie or we can ask that question later.
Well, there is a little bit of language that helps here. So if we keep reading on line 2, so they have to maximize federal funds using either the community eligibility provision or provision 2 or any other federal provision that in the opinion of the agency draws down the most possible federal funding for meals served in that program. And at the start of each school year, the Agency of Education may require that school food authority requesting the universal meal supplement begin a new cycle of the relevant federal provision and group sites in a manner the agency determines will maximize the drawdown of federal funds. So it's the Agency of Education. On line 8, subdivision 2 there, second breakfast which are allowed under the federal meals programs, I believe they're called excess breakfasts, do not qualify for reimbursement under this subsection. So one school breakfast provided per student. Line 10, a nonprofit pre-qualified private pre-kindergarten provider that is qualified pursuant to subsection 829C of this title, which is the pre-kindergarten statute, and is not also an approved or recognized independent school, is eligible for the universal meal supplement under this subsection if it operates a food program under a public school food authority. There's a little bit to unpack there. So what we're talking about here, or what you think of as a child care provider. So not an independent school that's also running a pre-K program, but a daycare center that qualifies for Act 166 funding for universal pre-K funding. If they operate a federal meals program, and if they do so under a public school food authority, which is kind of the umbrella under which all of these programs operate, and they're all over the state in different configurations, then they can take part in this universal meal supplement program for their students.
So I have a question there. Do most private daycares operate a food program under a public school food authority?
I'm gonna suggest you ask Rosie that question, but no. No.
Okay.
So. For 3 and 4-year-olds, if the school district has a contract with private providers, they're offering childcare. That, it sounds like to me that that's the group that would be eligible.
Yes, it's a little different. So under section 829 of our universal pre-kindergarten program now, public schools can run a pre-K program. And if the public school themselves has a pre-kindergarten program, they automatically qualify as part of a public school.
Burlington, I think the majority of the kids in the Burlington School District, they've contracted with private childcare providers to perform that function. The way I'm reading this, those privates that have contracted with the school district.
Yes, so it's maybe. So it's not a contract. So the way the universal pre-K program works now is private pre-kindergarten programs have to be pre-qualified under, and they have to meet certain requirements under AOE rules and DCF rules, okay? Parents can go to any program they want. So the school district does not have to actually contract with specific programs. If a program is pre-qualified under those rules, qualifies, then the parents can send their kiddos anywhere, with the exception that the law does allow for a school district to place geographic limitations on where those Act 166 dollars can go. And I can't speak to where those, if anyone's using those geographic limitations. But for example, in Burlington, if there are no geographic limitations, then a family could choose to use their Act 166 funding in any pre-qualified pre-K provider. And if those pre-qualified pre-K providers operate a school food program, number one, and two, they operated under a public school food authority, then they would qualify for the supplement. So maybe.
Most childcare providers are eligible for supplemental food grants, and I'm not sure how that fits with this.
That would be a great question for the agency. There is a whole nother federal meals program that the agency would be far better equipped to speak to, that childcare centers can fit under. So they could qualify for kind of two. They could operate one under one program or under the school food program that we're talking about here when we're talking about lunch and breakfast in your K through 12 or pre-K through 12 schools. But this language is specific that if the pre-K program is pre-qualified,
They're good.
if they offer the federal meals program, and if that federal meals program is under a public school food authority, then they would qualify for this. And I do not believe right now that's very many programs at all. Okay.
Yeah.
If I got anything wrong, you can correct me.
That's all correct, but I'm happy to
Yeah.
speak to it more.
I think that's why Rosie wanted to go second.
Okay, approved independent schools, so that's the public school program. For approved independent schools, it's very similar with some different language to account for the differences between the private schools and the public schools. So from state funds, you'll see we're on page 8, subsection C, line 15, line 16. From state funds appropriated to the agency to the agency from the education fund for the universal meal supplement, the agency shall provide a universal meal supplement for the cost of each meal actually provided to each qualifying student on public tuition. So the state is only going to reimburse meals for those publicly tuitioned students at approved independent schools. But the approved independent school has to offer free meals to all of their students. Provided that, and so here's some language that's applicable just to the approved independent schools. We're on page 9. If the approved independent school participates in the food programs as a site under a public school food authority, the public school food authority shall be reimbursed only for students attending the approved independent school on public tuition. And if the approved independent school participates in the community eligibility provision or is in a year other than the base year of provision 2, the school shall provide the agency with the number of students attending the school on public tuition and the total number of students enrolled in the school. The agency shall calculate the percentage of students attending the school on public tuition and multiply that number by the paid student percentage, the results of which shall be the number of meals the school shall be reimbursed for. So this is how the agency is going to figure out in those particular situations in the CEP program or in anything other than the base year of provision 2, how are they going to figure out how many meals to reimburse the school for? That's how they do it. Subdivision 2 here is the same. Second breakfasts don't count for reimbursement. Subdivision 3, this is getting at pre-K programs in an approved independent school. So students attending an approved independent school on public tuition shall include a pre-kindergarten child if the approved independent school also qualifies as a pre-qualified private provider and the child's school district of residence pays tuition to the school. So if this is not the daycare setting, this is the private school with a pre-K program. Again, only those students attending on Act 166 funds are going to qualify for those meals. And again, just like in public schools or on line 20 here on page 9, an approved independent school is eligible for the universal meal supplement only if it operates a food program that makes available those meals free to every student attending every day. And then the same language here in subdivision 5 on maximizing access to federal funds. It's the same for law around public schools. Subdivision D here is a little bit repetitive. I don't think it needs to be here, but there was a consensus that for clarity's sake, so someone doesn't need to flip back and forth between different sections of Title 16, perhaps actually adding the definition of universal meal supplement at the very end of this section would be helpful. So this language in subdivision D is just the definition of universal meal supplement. And that's it for universal meals. And so I just wanted, before we get into the local foods incentive grant, which is at the end of the bill, and it'll be quick. I just want to say that by putting that language that we just walked through in chapter 133 of Title 16, it's an allowable use of the education fund kind of automatically. because one of the provisions in that chapter talks about allowable uses of the education fund, and there's a little bit of a catch-all that says, or other programs in this chapter. And that would include things like transportation reimbursement, special I think there's a referral to special education funding. There's some other programs that kind of, I think JFO doesn't like this term, but kind of comes off the top of the education fund kind of automatically. So by plunking this language in that chapter,